Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are going to wrap up today with something I've been interested in. Back before the break, we checked out At the Drive-In. This was not for Reimagined Covers Week, but for Studio versus Live, which I think was actually back in November, now that I think about it. And we checked out At the Drive-In, and I was surprised because, I found out that it was like an early version of what the Mars Volta would eventually become. It featured the two main driving creative forces. I can't think of it, Cedric and I can't remember the other dude's name. And I was like, wow, I enjoyed this. It's still a bit chaotic, and when we checked out their live version, it had some of the meandering exploration, the jamminess that I would find more in the Mars Volta later on, but it was still very much rooted in that post-hardcore sound that I enjoyed in early the Mars Volta, but never really quite felt dominated their sound in the way that I wanted it to, and that's what At the Drive-In did for me. I figured, why not check out some more? So we're going to look at Arcarsenal, which I have been racking my brain. What does that mean? Obviously, it's a combination of Arsenal and something else. I looked up Arca and found out it was an artist, musical artist from like the 90s or something. I was like, maybe, but I couldn't really draw any comparisons between their music and what At the Drive-In does, and the word car is in there, but that would get rid of the beginning AR, and I don't know what this word means. It feels like one of those things that when someone explains it to me, I'll be like, oh, duh, of course, but like I just can't grasp it, and it's sort of irritating. This was suggested by somebody in the comments. I think it might have been on that At the Drive-In video we did a couple months ago, but yeah, they told me that this was a fantastic track from them off the same album, I believe, as the track that we explored then. So let's dive into it. I know this is like a really big preamble. 2.5 minutes is pretty lengthy for an intro for me, but whatever. I had thoughts about it. Y'all come here for my thoughts. You probably enjoyed a little bit of an extended intro on this. Let's dive in. Arcarsenal by At the Drive-In. I don't know if it's actually dissonant or if the timbre is just really unsettling. I'd love for the guitar over here to slow down just so I could hear some of the harmonic elements to it. They are really just pushing against the beat. There's a really interesting monotonous element to the vocal delivery, despite it being melodic. Here's the thing. I think people are either going to fall on one of two sides. There's not going to be anyone in the middle regarding this comment I'm about to make. It's either going to be like, yeah, that checks out, or really? But I enjoyed that. It reminds me of Hail the Sun a lot more than the Mars Volta does. There is this very specific dual guitar, dissonant driven post hardcore sound that both of these bands utilize really well, and I can draw a direct lineage between what At the Drive-In was doing here and where Hail the Sun uh, possibly was influenced by it or something similar. Like, this isn't really At the Drive-In sound, it's a common sound for the era and the style, but I can see the lineage of where, this was and where Hail the Sun is today. It is something that, again, like I mentioned last time, how did I miss this band? I think it's really because it came out just a hair bit too early. 2000 was before I started getting into sounds like this. The more abrasive, yelling, screaming, dissonant kind of stuff. And if, I say dissonant, like, y'all know I'm not a real big fan of dissonance. I think it needs to have purpose. It needs to be used as a spice. It's a sparingly type of additive to a song as far as the way that I prefer to listen to it. Um, I wouldn't have gotten into any of this stuff till like 2004. I was just a hair bit too young for this at the time, which is really why I want to begin a journey of post hardcore. I do think that's something I'm going to start this year. Sometime. Y'all can go on a journey with me. We're going to start at some sort of random inception point and just kind of go through most of post hardcore through the ages. I want to just do a big deep dive on it. Stay tuned stay tuned to the channel for more info on when that happens. But yeah, like the more I listen to this band, the more I'm like, dude, I wish I had known about these when I was younger, because it does tap into a bit of nostalgia for me. I love this sound. It's just that 2 decades later, I feel like other bands have done it. I don't like using the word better when we talk about stuff like this. It's the process of iteration. It sands off the rough edges, hones in on what something does well, focuses on the strengths and ignores the weaknesses, and even refines it, I think, is not the proper term for it. Modern bands doing this aren't better, they're just different in a way that I tend to prefer, but I can totally see how somebody would listen to this and modern styles of music that took influence from bands like At the Drive-In and think that it's just too polished or clean or well done, and it's missing the oomph. In this place, it could be the rawness, the humanity of it. the soul because it was just a bit less refined back here and people would enjoy that sound. But for me personally, I think I would have enjoyed this better when I was younger and I didn't have 2 decades more of hearing where this sound went, how it got refined and sanded down and processed. Let's talk about the music. This is chaotic. And I think that's what bands of the time were going for at the drive-in in particular. We've heard, the other track. I wish I could remember the name of that track. Um, I guess I'll link it up there. Y'all can check it out if you want. If you didn't catch it when we released it like 2 months ago. They're a chaotic band. There's a lot going on. The drums are intense. There's a lot of rhythmic elements coming out of it. There's a bit of polyrhythmic things, different limbs doing different things. They're all sort of in line occasionally with all the instruments. There are several sections where pretty much everybody comes into this call and response where the instruments go ba 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 and then he says a line, a couple syllables, and then ba ba ba, and it's just back and forth. But for the most part, the instruments are not as cohesive in their execution. They're all doing their own things. As I mentioned, the drums are already, even just looking at what they're doing alone is pretty chaotic, but they're not really in line with any of the other instruments. We have the guitar off to the left, which is frequently just doing tense things. Again, I'm not entirely sure if it's a harmonic thing where they're creating dissonance through notes intervals, or if it's just the timbre, the tone that they decided to figure out and create for this guitar. It's just whiny and creaky, and these are not typically terms I use to describe electric guitars, but it's kind of what it is, and it's nails on a chalkboard if they ran that through an amp, and I think that's phenomenal that he created that, but also I really didn't like it. Um, we have the guitar off to the right, which is mostly playing the chordal ideas, giving us our progression, but also giving us rhythmic ideas on top of that. And then we have the bass in the center doing its own thing. It's a walking bass line most of the time, but it's not really caring about anybody else's rhythmic or melodic ideas. In some senses, it's counterpoint because it's another melody line, but in other ways, it's also just its own song. It's not really counterpoint because it's not really playing alongside anybody else. It's doing its own thing entirely. And that takes us to the vocals in the center on top of the bass, and again, just kind of doing its own thing. It's a cacophony of sound that sometimes comes together for these unified moments, but it quickly disperses back into everybody doing what they want. It's at the drive-in. It's proto Mars Volta. The description I just gave could fit a lot of music in this style. But it all sort of comes together in a way, and I think that's the thing that's always fascinated me about post-hardcore, and probably one of the reasons why I think I've enjoyed it over the years consistently. It's a genre of music I don't think I could write. I've taken a stab at black metal, I've taken a stab at progressive metal, I've written some pop punk, I've written rock music. A lot of these genres I can refine down, especially after hearing so much of it, into core ideas, and I can iterate on them. I can say, oh, this is what a lot of bands have done for this part, so I'll use something similar, and I'll write a riff that kind of does the same thing, and I can sort of refine it all down to a process. But stuff like this, there isn't a process that I can see to it. It's just controlled chaos. I also have a difficult time describing it. It's hard for me to quantize what exact quantize qual it's hard for me to figure out the qualities. That's the word I want of what is actually happening here. And it makes it really difficult for me to reproduce. And so I've just kind of come to the conclusion that this isn't a genre of music that I will never be able to write well. And I think I just appreciate it from a distance in a way that I don't with a lot of music. Well, let me rephrase that. I can appreciate all music from a distance if I want to, but this is one that I'm forced to appreciate from a distance. And I think that's why it's always going to have a special place in my heart. And it's one of those things where I can't pull the curtain back. It will never lose its magic for me because I don't understand the language when someone tries to explain, the trick to the magic trick, the process to it. You pull the curtain back and it's more magic. um so yeah, back to the music. I keep getting distracted. This has been a very it's not been a very good analysis video. I feel like I've talked about me more than I usually do. I feel like that's going to be polarizing. Back to the music for real this time. There's a really interesting element about the vocals. First of all, I didn't know this dude had a scream. It's more like a compressed clean, a compressed yell. I don't know. It's not a typical post-hardcore harsh. There is a very strong melodic quality to it. There are notes being picked underneath the compression very clearly. But I never heard anything like this in the Mars Volta, I don't think. Well, I've only listened to one album from that, and Inerratic ESP, which I think is the only track outside of that one album that we've checked out. And that wasn't an album review. We've just literally checked out like all 8 tracks on that album, I think, individually, which probably upsets a lot of people. I continuously hear that that is an album you just need to listen to front to back. It's the one with Visman Cygnus on it or something like that. And I have literally listened to it out of order, completely in a vacuum. Oh man, I probably should just give it a go straight forward. Alright, geez, back to. Okay, so the dude is screaming. Gotta stay on topic here. And the thing is, like I mentioned, there's a melodic element to it. There are pitches being selected, but it's very monotonous. It comes to my ears and presents itself in the same vein of hardcore vocals. It's one of the things I'm not a big fan of about hardcore music, even though I kind of enjoy the musical element, the instrumental part, is that the vocals are just one note, just over and over. Oh, early metalcore is another one like this, like traditional metalcore, not like the melodic metalcore or metallic hardcore that we got later on. Like traditional old school metalcore, like just yeah, it's just like one note all the time, and that's kind of what this feels like. That's how it presents itself to me. Even though I can hear the pitches, I'm like there is singing going on, but I think like even the melody lines, the pitched elements are the same thing over and over. I don't know, something about it just comes across extremely monotonous despite having a melodic quality to it. It isn't until like the last 30 seconds that we actually enter into a more melodious and contrasting writing style as far as the lead line goes. And I found that really fascinating. On multiple levels. One, I just wasn't expecting the vocal style, but two, I kind of expect more contrast out of this band, specifically out of this singer, and we didn't get it here. We went in a very different direction. I'm intrigued even more now, primarily because of that. it just shows that the band has more multitudes than I expected, which seems to be the running thing for anything that these two people are made up of. Any group that these two people are in, I should put it that way. Honestly, I think that's about it. It's like a really weird analysis for the channel for me. But yeah, I really don't have any depth of reading on this. It just sounds like a lot of controlled noise. It's cacophonous. There's always too many things going on. I think at one time it was yelled in my ear, "Do you know what skin tastes like?" or something like that, and I was just like, "What?" It's yeah. I don't know what to make of it. But it was pleasant to my ears, which is it just drives home the fact to me that post-hardcore I just have a soft spot for. No matter really what people do with that sound, no matter how far they push it into unlistenability, unpalatability, it's still going to sound good to my ears. Maybe not great, maybe not amazing, but still good. As many things as this song does that I typically don't enjoy, I still liked listening to it. So yeah, that's a bit analysis light for me. But let's dive into some lyrics. Maybe that'll open some avenues up and we can explore a little bit more of what the song is attempting to do. Alright, so here's some cool stuff. This is also an opening track for an album. We just got done checking out the opening track from Psy's Imaginary Sonicscape. That track was called Corpse Cry, Angel Fall. And this is the first track off of Relationship of Command, their 2000 album. Yeah. Oh, it's their final album too. I didn't know that. Did I know that last time we checked them out? I don't think so. Because this also came off of that album, right? Or that one came off of this album. Oh, was it Quarantine? Was that what we checked out? Yep. Have Trigger Will Travel. I remember that line. Man, that was an awesome song. So yeah, I definitely need to check this album out, if nothing else. It seems to be about, well, I wasn't really quite sure. There's some allusions to stuff, but it didn't quite click with me until the bridge, which does say, "Have you ever tasted skin?" Um, and yeah, that's cannibalism. So that mixed with the ideas of beware, which is repeated many times in here, and the idea of robbing thousands of faces of their cause, having a sickened thirst, it all lines up with somebody who has killed and eaten many people. That's sort of what it is. What I think is interesting then is the refrain of beware over and over and over. It's repeated like 8 times in our outro. I'm curious who says this. The song is written in the first person. I must have read 1,000 faces, and all these voices won't give up. The sickened thirst glues it all together. I must have robbed them of their cause. And then the shouting of beware. I ask because verse 3 is a power struggle. Who's in charge here? Barking out loud so clear, because I'd really like to meet him. That's what verse 3 says. Now, the Genius annotations mention that this song is rumored to be about serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know much about Jeffrey Dahmer. I know he killed a lot of people. I'm guessing he was possibly a cannibal. But, I've never looked the guy up. I don't know much about him. But here's what I'm thinking. The song is cacophonous. There's multiple things going on all the time. I wonder if he had any mental disorders. Possibly that would lead him to have voices in his head to instruct him to do any of this. Primarily because if this song is about Jeffrey Dahmer, as it's rumored to be, this third verse and the screaming out of beware would introduce a voice of restraint, of trying to get people away from me or away from him, the first person me, because he's dangerous. It says beware, I do these things, you know, and there's another part of him who's making these decisions. Why can't I have a little bit more control? But as usual with post-hardcore, I see a lot of lyrics like these that are about books or people. At least to me, it seems like post-hardcore and even a little bit Midwest emo. A lot of lyricists tend to be well-read and very interested in events and people and things like that. And they'll read a book or read a bit of history or read about, a prolific person and they'll write some lyrics about it. I don't really see this too much in other. Well, actually, heavy metal was pretty big on this too. Especially when it came to like history and wars. War and metal, man, they just go together. Where is it going with this? I don't remember. Oh, yeah. It's very light on the subject matter, though, which is where I was going with this. Post-hardcore and emo, they like to write lyrics about stuff they've read about recently, but, like, just don't really go into depth. So the song doesn't really have anything in it that I think specifically points towards being Jeffrey Dahmer. In fact, he says, I've robbed thousands of faces of their causes, and Jeffrey Dahmer did not kill thousands of people. So I don't know if Jeffrey Dahmer had a voice of reason within him, wanting to scream beware, wanting to take control back of the body. I don't know. So I guess it's about as much insight as I can give into that, assuming that there was an internal power struggle, though I think that the cacophonous element of the music lent itself well to that, but lyrically, I'm still kind of torn if that's exactly what's at play here. Um, those have been my thoughts on At the Drive-Ins. Arcarsenal. That makes even Arcarsenal. All right, yo, if anybody knows what's going on with this title, and more so, what's up with the lyrics and any insight into that, please let me know. Drop that information down in the comments section. Anything you'd like to add to the conversation, your own thoughts, comments, perspectives, opinions, put that stuff down in the comments as well. I know this was a bit analysis light, but I don't know. Like I said, maybe some people might enjoy just a little bit more personalness. Not personality, just personable elements to the channel. Anyways, above the comment section and just in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree in there. It takes you to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I forgot to change that. Come on, Bryan. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.